My name is Maria McDougall, and I'm a college access counselor here at the Finance Authority of Maine. And joining me today is the fabulous Nikki Vachon, who's also a college access counselor. We like to tag team these sorts of things, especially with comments and questions. Plus, it's better to present to an actual face. And I don't know if it's windy where you're all joining us from, but it's been howling here in Naples where I am, and I'm constantly afraid I'm going to lose power at important moments. So she's going to back me up if I suddenly disappear. Another reason for disappearing might be a cat that will join us. So if you see a fluffy tail floating by, that is Ophelia, who likes to join me in important meetings. We are going to cover a lot today. I'm hoping that we don't run too far over. I know everyone's time is valuable, and if you're like me, you're on Zoom a lot and it can be overwhelming, but I do want to make sure that we address some of the key concepts, important topics, and then of course the real guts of it, resources for you all as educators to help teach these important topics, along with some things to consider and some best practices, and then also how FAME can help. So what the areas we're going to focus on today are budgeting and spending plans, saving money, paychecks and taxes, insurance, and increasing income. These are like the sort of major personal finance topics that are very important for everyone to know, but in particular young adults. And if we can kind of teach these concepts at an early point in the education process, it's just going to serve everyone better. For those of you that registered early, you didn't quite see all the questions, but I added to the registration a couple of questions. First was, which topics do you think young adults know the least about? And 70% of those registered who answered those questions think that students know the least about taxes and insurance, which I would think pretty much lines up with what I think Nikki and I hear in the field. And when I asked my almost 14-year-old stepson, he went, "What's insurance?" So it seems to line up. I polled him and some of his friends for some of this today. So the way we're going to frame this conversation is to kind of think about assumptions. So for each topic, we'll think about sort of what are the assumptions that young people have about these particular areas, some resources for addressing them, and some things to consider. So as we go through, feel free to put anything you want to comment or question in the chat. Specific questions can go in the Q&A. I will pause a few times throughout to shout out Nikki and see if there's anything definitely worth mentioning. And then I'm hoping, we'd love to hear from you. So if you've done something that's been really successful with students you're working with, or your own personal finance, or with your children, please share that with us. We would love to hear it. So I want to start also by talking about our assumptions as educators and adults about young adults' attitudes towards personal finance. So we assume that they don't care, that they don't want to think about it. They're like, nope, I have no interest, doesn't matter to me. That they don't have money, which is sometimes true, but I occasionally run into a student who's worked really hard and like saved all kinds of money and understands the value, and that their parents provide for them. And I think Nikki would also speak to the fact that more and more students we're running into in the FAFSA process are self-supporting, or risk of homelessness, or don't have a financial support system with someone in the household. So these are all things I think to kind of keep in the back of our minds as we're discussing these personal finance topics, to just kind of check our own assumptions when we're having these conversations with our students and trying to get the buy-in, right? Because I think that's where we want to succeed with the students, is get them to sort of hook onto something and build new and healthy habits. So their assumptions, so young adults, Nikki added this graphic for me, which I love. Their assumptions about personal finance are like, why bother? If I don't have money, what's the purpose? Like, why do I need to know how to do any of this stuff if I'm already broke? I've got time to figure it out later, which seems to be a running theme with young folks sometimes, even particular to the college application and financial aid process. They think they have all this time. They have no control over the amount of their paycheck right? They don't understand how the ins and outs of paychecks work. My parents pay for everything. So those students who do have that support system, they're like, I don't need to know any of this. My parents do all that. Their thoughts about insurance, it's expensive for something intangible, which is arguably a true statement, but they don't see the value of that. So those are kind of what they're coming to the table with related to personal finance. And I've sort of pulled these from various articles and things that I've read. Certainly very generalized statements. There are folks that have differing opinions and differing assumptions, but certainly broadly, they sort of think it's not important if I don't have money and I've got plenty of time to learn this. But we all know if you start a habit at a young age and you stick to it, you're more likely to continue it and build healthy long-term habits. Some things to consider as we start this conversation is that young adults are now bombarded with messages about money, status. In this internet world we're in, I mean, there's podcasts have ads to like buy all kinds of interesting stuff. YouTube has ads for that. Then of course there's the status symbol of all of these sort of shows and things we watch where the culture is you have money and here's what you're supposed to do with it, without real instruction about basic concepts, and then things sort of get lost. So with the messaging that's out there, I think there are some things that are getting better about explaining sort of baseline personal finance concepts, but not in the way I think we as educators would like. Personal finance education in school varies. If there's any formal personal finance education at all, I know in certain schools it's rolled into math or social studies. There might be a personal finance semester or particular course, but it's not quite blanketed or standardized across the board. Life experience and upbringing have an impact on young adults' attitudes about money. So how they grew up, if they grew up with money, without money, their parents' spending habits, phrases they heard. I grew up with like money doesn't grow on trees. Hardly come, easy go was my dad's favorite thing to say. Like as every time he would spend money, hardly come, easy go. So all of that kind of is built into how young adults feel about money and how they develop their own habits. They also have a lot of other things going on. They're learning all kinds of things in school, whether that's in high school, middle school, high school, if they're already in college. There's just maybe not enough time they don't prioritize the time to sit down and focus on their own personal finance. And of course, the pandemic has changed everything for a lot of students and families. And so we're going to talk about these concepts kind of generally under the assumption that there isn't a pandemic and that these are concepts that they're going to need to know beyond now, but that have a different kind of tone under what has happened with the pandemic. And, I was just reading an article that those folks that had done sort of the right thing and saved up an emergency fund, drained it in the first 3 months of this thing and now are sort of lost for how to move forward, even though they were considered planners, right? And had done sort of the save up your living expenses. So that is certainly going to be an undercurrent throughout the presentation, but just kind of keep those things in the back of your mind. As we're going along, again, please feel free to chat, but I want to also I want you to leave today with some new approaches, perhaps, definitely some new resources. And as we're going along, Nikki's going to drop in the chat a link for a Google Sheet. You'll see kind of two topics. So your own personal money hacks. So how do you, what's worked for you, what's great, and then, ways that you might approach these topics or teach these topics to young adults. Any ideas you have, or even if you want to throw questions in there, and then we'll make that available to folks as well as part of our collection of resources in Google for you. So feel free as I'm talking or as you think of something to share that in the Google Docs so we can keep that going. And then you can, certainly add things later. We'll make sure everyone still has the link for that moving forward. We're going to start with budgeting. Okay, and so like I said, we've framed these as sort of, we'll talk about the assumptions, the approaches, and then some resources. So young people, young adults, budgeting isn't cool or necessary. Like, I have to sit down and write a budget. I have to I grabbed this image because I think it's what maybe a lot of young people would assume, like you've got a calculator and it's all paper process, and they just don't feel the need for it. Again, they don't see the point if they don't have a lot of money. Maybe their parents were terrible at budgeting, so they didn't have that foundation in their home, or they've either picked up that behavior or they work the exact opposite, and they think it's like a paper process that's really time consuming. Most young adults, I'm thinking like particularly Gen Z right now, want the instant gratification. They want, like, give me the thing that's easy and fast and gives me a good return quickly. And so I think they assume that a budgeting process is going to take time and pen and paper. And so maybe they're not interested in that. So let's think about some approaches to this. One of the things I want to kind of flow through this presentation is changing the narrative and some of the vocabulary. And I've been trying to catch myself on this too, as a way for buy-in, but B, to sort of think about ways to make things click. I went to a presentation once that was talking about, like, your past self, your present self, and your future self as a way to think of personal finance. And I was like, that's genius. Instead of just like budgeting, income, and investing, right? So if we talk about changing the narrative, that may help in terms of getting buy-in from your students. So instead of create a budget, try make your money work, or build a spending plan, or figure out your money. Something sort of easy, colloquial that makes it seem a little more approachable. Ask students to think about goals, short and long-term goals, and how money will play a role. So if their goal is to have a car in the next 6 months, that's a great inroad to say, okay, let's figure out the financial plan for that. And the first step in that is figuring out your budget. Or if the long-term goal is going to college, okay, great. Let's talk about all the things related to that, including creating a budget for the money that you're going to earn this summer, that sort of thing. So thinking about goal setting, and even if it seems like a goal that doesn't have a monetary component, there probably is one. So you can kind of get them thinking about it that way. Spend some time discussing the psychology of personal finance. So the why. Why do you think that particular way? Or, survey the group. What do you think about this? Who budgets? What is the first thing that comes to mind when you think budgeting? I know that personally, unpacking some of my money habits and thoughts around spending and saving has really changed some of my behaviors. And so really spending some time unpacking the why of particular habits or approaches can sometimes really make a concept click. We're going to talk a lot today about gamifying. So some of these topics are not necessarily fun to talk about. They can be a little dry. I'm a big fan of like play a game about it. Whatever way you can make it fun and engaging is really going to help. And of course, the other thing that will underlie all of this is be sensitive to what's going on. So right now, it's definitely the pandemic, but also being sensitive to the fact that students in a classroom probably come from various socioeconomic statuses and have various experiences with money from their family, from their own personal work or lack thereof. So when you're talking sort of broad concepts, just kind of keep in the back of your mind that there is going to be a varied group of students in terms of what their financial comfort level is, what their financial literacy is, and what their life circumstances have shown them about money. Some resources for budgeting. So encourage students to use a method that works for them. My example of this is always like those diet and weight loss apps, right? The like MyFitnessPal, where you log everything you eat and what you exercise. And I'm good at that for like a hot 5 days. And then I get like, I don't want to do this. It's too much work. Like put a microchip in my arm and do it that way so that I can not have to think about it. That doesn't work for me. So I don't stick to it. So I'm always going to encourage a student, I don't care how they keep track of their spending and budgeting. I just want them to do it. So there's tons of apps out there. I'm partial to Mint. It's what I use personally. I just like that it's kind of includes goal setting, recommendations for things like high yield savings, which we'll get to. And you can really track every dollar of like what category it goes in. It alerts you if you have gone over budget. There's also You Need a Budget, the Dave Ramsey plan that lots of people are fans of, although that one's not free. So it can be kind of expensive. There's a cost associated if students aren't ready for that. Of course, we have our spending plan worksheet at Fame that is downloadable on our website. Maybe you've got a student who's really savvy at Excel and has put together their own spreadsheet. A colleague of mine, when I worked at one of the universities, had this amazing spreadsheet that they used for like keeping track of their check register. I say that anyway, when I've mentioned that before, young students go, "Oh, what?" And I'm like, when you balance your checkbook, and they go, "Oh, what?" So there are some things that are sort of becoming obsolete, but she had this great Excel spreadsheet. So lots of different resources exist, and some of the websites we'll talk about later also incorporate budgeting activities. Nikki, before we move on to the next topic, anything worth discussing in the chat or Q&A?
No, I'm just putting into the chat where they can download that, the Manage publication.
Great.
And I wanted to also mention, I too just started my app diet again this morning for like the millionth time since the pandemic. And I use an Excel spreadsheet that is color-coded and glorious. That is all.
Yes. Yes. So again, it's about finding an option that works for you. I have friends that like did the cash envelopes method to like pay off some of their debt. Whatever system is going to work for you is what, and for each of your students is going to have the most success. And I think that's fair too, sort of present them with the options and let them choose the one that works best for them. Assumptions on savings. So we're going to shift the next topic into savings. We're big sort of pay yourself first people at Fame. We'll talk about that as we talk about changing the narrative. But here's what some young folks have for assumptions about saving. Seems impossible without much money, which is on some level a true statement in some cases. There's no point in saving money if my parents pay for everything. I've actually heard that from young people before. My needs are met, so why bother saving? And saving is not as much fun as spending. Guilty, right? I am one of those people that will order a thing that popped up in my Instagram ads, or my love language is gifting. So holidays are really hard for me because I like to buy people the presents that they really want, no matter the cost. And so for me, like, spending is more fun. I think that's true for many of us, although there are folks that sort of really value the saving, and like seeing those numbers increase is really exciting. So people differ, but I think in general, young folks are like, hey, if I've got money, I'm going to spend it. So approaches to discussing the savings conversation, again, changing the vocabulary. So instead of save money for emergencies, use pay yourself first or pay for your future, right? That may key them in on like, oh, I'm giving myself a salary by setting aside money for savings. So changing that narrative can really make a difference. Encourage starting small. I think, again, they're bombarded with so many messages about, especially people, personal finance nerds like me that listen to like podcasts and watch budgeting YouTube videos. They talk about sort of the 3 months of emergency savings you need, and then the various savings accounts for things. And it seems very big. If you can encourage starting small and just building those habits, I think that's going to help. So do they already have a piggy bank? Are they shoving change in their mattress? What are they doing? Have they adopted any tiny small habits for saving money? Maybe they're savvy and they've sold a bunch of stuff on the marketplace. They're like, oh, okay, you're already doing something that will help you save money. Provide anecdotes. I have the cat I mentioned at the beginning. She has a lot of health issues. She's very expensive. She's had a number of trips to the emergency vet over this pandemic. It's interesting how it seems to have affected some animals, like it has affected some people. And, you know, every vet trip, I have insurance for her, but much like human health insurance, which we will talk about, her issues are considered a pre-existing condition. So the insurance won't cover the particular thing that brought her to the emergency vet. So that's why I have emergency savings. I mean, certainly for like bills, if there's a change in my job or housing or anything like that. But really it's those things that like you didn't anticipate, that you don't necessarily budget for. Like I didn't have to make a really terrible decision about her care because I had money in my savings to pull from. Any of those real life stories, you know, broken washing machine, my friend's oven last Thanksgiving when people could have people over for Thanksgiving broke like the day before. You know, any of those kinds of anecdotes and stories, I'm big on like be narrative, tell a story, get a relatable circumstance together. That's going to create some buy-in. Foster creative approaches. So can you make it a competition? Okay, who's going to save the most money in a month? Those kinds of things I think are really, sometimes people just need the incentive. So can you incentivize it? Can you make it creative? How can you sort of make them think outside the box with their family? So make it a family savings competition. Anything like that will sometimes create more of a buy-in. And then of course, be sensitive to what's going on. The pandemic has made saving nearly impossible for many people. That is not to be ignored, but hopefully some of the things we'll talk about in the increasing income section will create a little bit more comfort and have folks feel like they have funds to save. But just getting them thinking about it. If they can't actively save right now, if they understand the importance and the value of like saving for their future, then when the funds sort of become available to do that, they'll prioritize it for themselves. Savings resources. I'm a big set it and forget it person. I want an app that's going to do it for me. There's a lot going on. I'm like, if I was famous, I would definitely be one of those people that has a personal assistant because I don't want to have to do all the things. So I like apps like Acorns, which will do like investing change. So it kind of rounds up on purchases and then invests it. So that's another, I'm like a squirrel. I have money like tucked away in various apps and accounts. But there's lots of set it and forget it apps out there. I also automate my savings. So I have my portion of savings that I've decided automatically deposited into a high yield savings account. If I don't, I will not save it. That's full disclosure. I will buy shoes or cute cat sweaters that I don't really need. So I have sort of taken it out of sight, out of mind. But there are apps that will help people do this. There's also coupon apps, which can save money. So Rakuten is a big one. I use it personally. I used to think it was kind of a scam. And then actually our colleague Jess told me like, no, really use it. And anytime I need something, I go there first and I type it in and see if there's coupons or cashback store on that. It used to be called Ebates. So some of you might know it under that. I use like Fetch Rewards, which is one that if you scan all your receipts, you can get points towards gift cards, which seems like not necessarily saving. It's not cash, but then you can get gift cards for stuff you would buy normally with your cash, right? Encourage habits for saving. So I kind of adopted, I don't use cash a ton, but when I was assuming all $1 bills were also coins, and that went in my emergency change jar. So anything that was less than a $5 bill was change and went in my savings jar. And you'd be surprised how much that adds up. And speaking of adding up, doing the math, so showing them numbers. So NerdWallet has this great savings calculator. They have a number of different calculators out there, but they have this savings calculator where you can say, okay, this is what I want to have, or this is what I currently have and how fast I'd like to grow it. And you'll see the raw numbers of how long it's going to take, what you need to contribute each month to make that successful. I think presenting the numbers and kind of doing the math and seeing, you know, the concept of compounding interest. So earning money on money that you're saving, and what that can do, I think will also help students and their families be able to buy in. Nikki, anything on savings in the chat? Anyone sharing any good tips or tricks? Awesome.
Yeah, so we had a theme, which is feed the pig, like feed the piggy bank, which I think is amazing. If you guys can all like come around a theme, awesome. I'm also seeing some movement in the Google spreadsheet with some ideas, which is amazing. But if you guys are online shoppers, I use WikiBuy. I put that in the Google sheet. And whenever I buy something online, my WikiBuy pops up and says, "Oh, we'll scan codes for you." So it goes through a list of codes, and we'll find online coupon codes. So I've saved some money there. So
that's awesome. Yeah, Honey is another one of those. Yeah, awesome. Feel free in the chat, folks, and on the Google Talk to share any resources that you know of. And the beauty of technology and having smartphones is that there are so many apps for these kinds of things. And so you can sort of have things tucked away. I also, sort of as a general shopping rule, if I do something on Amazon, I like put it in the cart and then I wait, because if you don't buy it immediately, sometimes the price will go down so that you will push the purchase button. Plus it makes me stop and think like, okay, did I immediately need this, or is this just a thing that I think that I want? So kind of, gauge students' shopping habits. See if it's an immediate, are they impulse buying, or are they considering purchases? And, if they are going to buy something, how can they maximize cashback and or discounts? Great topics. We're going to move on to paychecks and taxes. We've got insurance in a separate bucket, but this is, I think, a big one where I know a lot of us felt like this is an area that students know the least about. So there are assumptions around this topic, that their rate of pay times hours work is what landed in their account. So I remember the first time, like my big girl job, when I got a paycheck and had to fill out all the paperwork, I was like, wait a minute, this is not what I thought when I did the math of what I was going to make per hour. And that's because I was 16 and I had no idea that taxes and insurance come out of my paycheck. So they kind of do the math and go, oh, I can make $200 a week. Well, it's really more like $95.46 after taxes, right? So they don't necessarily understand that. Sometimes they think their employer decides their tax rates or what comes out of their paycheck. Or they misunderstand the W-4 when they're setting up their payroll. So they don't understand what, exemptions are, deductions, all of that. My dad always just said, claim zero. And I never knew what that meant. I just always put the zero in. It wasn't until many years into a grown-up job that I started figuring out what exemptions meant and what impact that had. So if they get it, at least my dad told me something. They might not know anything, and then they have to do all this tax paperwork when they get their first job that's not, cash or babysitting or dog walking. So there are some assumptions coming into play here about paychecks in particular. Approaches about this. So explain gross and net, right? We say those terms like your gross pay, your net pay, as what you earn and what lands in your wallet, right? So what you earn is not the same as what lands in your wallet or your bank account, right? Keep it framed that way, because gross and net might not mean a lot to a young person. But rate of pay or what you earn, is different than what lands in your wallet. And they're like, they only care about the amount that lands in their wallet anyway. I know I certainly do, but, and encourage them, if they're working, have them bring in their own pay stub. Let's workshop our own money and let's see what our paychecks are telling us. Let's look at the pay stub. And I know that so many jobs now really are leaning towards direct deposit. And so some young people probably don't even ever pick up or look at their pay stub, which I can understand from a convenience perspective, but I do think there is something missing there if a student's not examining their pay stub and understanding, here's what I've earned and here's what's coming out. And explain the value of taxes with practical examples. So taxes is one of those concepts that You know, they hear, of course, in political season, they've heard a lot, raising my taxes, doing this, blah, blah, blah. But really just talking about like public services, roads, bridges, the school that they're in, emergency medical services. Those are the things when we talk about, you know, state taxes, like what is that going towards? Or, you know, Social Security, what is that? That's sort of putting in for the future. Those kinds of things, you know, unless you have a student who's really interested in like going into tax preparation or wants to do a deep dive into, you know, pay brackets and tax brackets and that sort of thing. I think just saying that like these are contributions that you make to your community and your in the country can sometimes make that hit a little easier. My favorite resource for this particular topic is without question Nextgen Personal Finance. If you are listening to this and you have not explored NGPF, I highly, highly recommend it. They have top information on all of these topics we're going to discuss today. And what's great is it's free. They have whole semester courses built already. So a lot of it operates with Google Classroom. It's all customizable. You can get videos, games, worksheets. You could do like a 6-week personal finance course through Nextgen's curriculum, and they're constantly updating the topics and how they're teaching it. There's a podcast, which is really cool. But if you're just looking for a particular video, so you're like, I need a way to explain the W-4 to my classroom, you'll see there in the little screen grab I did, they've got a thing for that. If you're like, I need a video to show them on budgeting, they have that. I mean, a whole repository of information. I cannot like stress enough how amazing NGPF is. You can sign up for free. We even as FAME, like we're not technically teachers, but we were allowed to sign up for free. There's a whole community. So they have this cool Facebook group where someone's like, hey, I tried this thing in my classroom and it didn't work great, but what do you recommend? So there's a whole community of NGPF folks. It's incredible. I highly, highly recommend it as a resource. And then of course, iGrad, which you've heard us at FAME talk about a lot, also has a ton of information related to taxes, insurance, understanding the paycheck. They'll do a little walkthrough of, you know, a video kind of taking a student through their own pay stub. So those are probably the two most robust resources for this particular topic. I've heard other classrooms have brought in like a tax professional to go over like what the specific taxes mean, particularly with like high school students, and helps them fill out their 1040 forms and kind of goes through what that all looks like. That's also another great resource if you're getting that as a common question. Nikki, before we go on to insurance, questions, thoughts about the paychecks and taxes?
Nope, we're cruising along. I'm just putting links in the chat as we go and into the Google Doc as well.
Wonderful, thank you. Insurance, I put my friend Flo up here, the progressive lady, because, you know, I think she's a television icon at this point. I think if you asked young people who that is, they would be able to tell you where she's from. Insurance is another one that is kind of elusive to young people, I think. You know, they think it's expensive and unnecessary, or I'll figure out how to pay for an emergency if it happens. I need my money now. So this intangible concept of insurance is really lost on an instant gratification society, right? That I have money now that I need to buy things with. Why am I going to pay for something that maybe, hopefully, I won't actually need to use? Or they assume that you only need or only can get car and health insurance. That, you know, there are other types of insurance available. So certainly, I think those are the biggies that young folks think when they think insurance. Some approaches to this concept, again, changing the narrative. So insurance is a safety blanket. It's a cushion. It's certainly, there's no like deliverable, like you paid for insurance, you get this. But you'll be really happy you had it once you get into a situation where you need it. Again, storytelling. So share about a time you were grateful that you had insurance. Again, the animals, if it's not a pre-existing condition, or, you get into a car accident. No one expects to get into a car accident, but that's an immediate ticket to, oh man, I have no financial support for this. How am I supposed to pay for this accident, particularly if it was your fault? And then have students look at some emergency scenarios where insurance would be crucial and talk through them. So how would you pay for this if this happened? Let's say you are in a car accident. What is your first step? What would you do? And talk about the ways insurance can offset some of that. So again, like real world practical examples. They need car insurance in Maine. If they get pulled over and they don't have auto insurance, that's a ticket. Needs to be valid for that reason. And then there's also the other types of insurance, right? So I talked about pet insurance. Renter's insurance is huge if you're talking, especially with college students, if they're getting their apartment for the first time. Renters is big, especially in the instance of like a theft. You've got a shady roommate who took off with the stereo and the TV and the computers. You want to make sure that's covered. I think we all know as grown-ups about homeowners insurance, but I don't think that's necessarily a concept that young people think about if they're not homeowners or they're not thinking about becoming homeowners. But renter's insurance is another one of those things that can really make people think. And it's usually fairly inexpensive. When I was renting, I think I had like a $17 a month policy that I just added on to my car insurance. You can usually bundle those things. And I added like a little bit to it for protecting my jewelry specifically. If you have nice jewelry, all of these things that I think they don't think about. Certainly, I would love to not pay for insurance, but I'm certainly glad that I have it in certain scenarios, right? And so I think just trying to bring that concept home and think about, okay, sure, you wish you had the money now, but if you need to come up with thousands of dollars later because you don't have insurance for X, Y, and Z, you're going to regret not having it. Stress the importance of quotes and shopping around. Maybe a classroom activity is getting some car insurance quotes. Shop around. There are a number of different sites that will help sort of build, it's like the orbits of insurance that will help you find rates comparable to what you're already getting for coverage, but maybe it's, go to each of the sites, say, talk about insurance, what's important to have, and then have them do some research and make it a competition. Who can find the best price, the best premium for this level of coverage, right? And encourage them to get into that habit. I get a new car insurance quote probably every other year just to make sure I'm still paying the lowest. And then I did call Progressive one time and say, I'm going to leave because I found a better rate. And they were like, no, you're a platinum member now. Here's all the things. Like I have random discounts and my premium went down like $20 as like a loyalty benefit that I don't even think is real, but they probably made up because I was going to leave. So just building the habit of doing the shopping around. One great resource for this is actually pretty new, and NGPF, we talked about gamification in the beginning, big fan. They have a number of games related to personal finance topics that I just love. And so this one is new. It's thebummergame.com. And it basically goes over what we just talked about. So they sort of have to shop for different insurance. It gives them like, here's a basic plan, here's the different levels of coverage you can get. And then they kind of spin this wheel of disaster and things happen. And based on what insurance choices they made, can they get through 4 rounds of crises, essentially? It's really fun. I did not get through 4 rounds of the game the few times that I played, but it does, you have a certain amount you can spend on your premiums per month. NGPF has done such a fantastic job with the gamification that I think it's a fun way to have students interact with the concept of insurance. Nikki, I see some things popping up in the chat. Anybody got?
I think it's me.
Okay, good. Just making sure.
But I did want to mention that I had not, we always say, check your insurance. We say that all the time, right?
Yeah.
This kid didn't do it. We've owned this house for 10 years. And I was talked into doing this by Mary Dyer, who's our resident genius. And I went to an agent, and I just made a phone call and said, listen, I'm pretty sure we have the best rate. What do you think? We saved $1,200 for the year. $1,200. So that's all.
Yeah.
So I don't say you really should look into it.
Yeah, it's really, for you personally, do a checkup, check your rates on things, but also when you're talking to students, encourage that habit, like the shopping around and the getting the best coverage for the best price. There's obviously like insurance commercials all the time. I got 2 separate things from Geico in the mail, both addressed to me yesterday. So they're, again, bombarded with messages, right? But encourage them to kind of take a look and do the fine tooth combing of that. But the bummer game's really fun, so I encourage play a few rounds of that. It's pretty fun. Increasing income, and I think especially when we're talking about Gen Z, like how do I make more money? What do I do? But also, if the pandemic, changed people's employment status, there's really a need to sort of say, okay, I really need to boost my income, or we just bought a house. We've only been in this house a few months, and I'm like, how can I make more money? Because now I'm a homeowner and I have a mice problem that could potentially get expensive. How do I increase my income? So this is a topic we wanted to include as well. So some assumptions is that, they don't have money to save and can't get more. They feel like, hustling to make more money shows other your status. So if you're like trying to sell a bunch of stuff, or you're like, really trying to work like 3 jobs to increase your income, that people are going to think that you don't have money. There's like a status attachment to like the grind of earning money. Although I think that's slowly changing. I think people are sort of adopting the idea of like, yeah, do the thing, make all the money, have a bunch of side hustles. Selling unwanted items is dangerous or taboo. Certainly if you're doing it smart, you can make some money. I've sold a number of things. Moving tells you what you do and do not need. So I sold a number of things on the marketplace and purchased. I needed like a little side table for our guest room, and I found one for $10 on the marketplace. And if I can't make a lot all at once, it's not worth it. So they want like big returns, big bang for my buck. If I'm going to make only $5 or $10 here and there, not worth my time to try to increase my income. So those are the assumptions they're coming to the table with. Some approaches. Every little bit adds up. Talk about a side hustle instead of a second job, right? Like how can you like leverage your skills and talents? What's something you're already good at? Let's figure out how you can make money doing it, right? If you're super crafty or you have a particular skill. In college, I would edit people's essays, like didn't write them for them, but I would pull out my trusty red pen and nerd it up and pay and charge like $5 an essay for my like pizza money. Leverage what they already like doing, what their skills are. Increasing your income means feeling in control of your money and the ability to reach your financial goals. So tie it back to like their goal setting, right? If they want the car, if they want to pay for college, okay, let's feel like we're in control of our finances. And if we have the ability to keep our income going and have that momentum, that's going to help us reach our goals faster. Activities they could do, looking up themselves and their family on the main unclaimed property search. So there's this great, I think every state has them through the Department of Treasury, where let's say somebody had a car insurance payout, or maybe a refund, a product refund, something, and you moved and it didn't make it to the mailbox and it got kind of floated around. Eventually it's going to land with the state. It becomes sort of the property of the state until claimed. So the unclaimed property search is a database that has all that information that you can look up and see if you have anything there. I check it probably quarterly just in case. I will do it. I'm checking a little bit more diligently now since I've moved. But it's kind of fun. Like look up your family members. See, my brother had $250 in a insurance refund that he didn't know about, that I looked up him. I was like, hey, go through the claims process, fill this out, get your money. And it doesn't say specific dollar amounts, but it'll say like above $100, below 50. So just another way to like, hey, add this to your end of the year, you're getting your taxes ready, that sort of thing. But it could be a fun classroom activity. Make a list of items you could sell on the marketplace, I guess, or Craigslist, although I don't think Craigslist is as popular anymore. But, can they go home, or they're already home, can they go around their house and think about things that they haven't used or that they could make and sell. I know like Poshmark is a big one right now for clothing, right? Clothing and accessories. So can you consign? Can you resell? You know, maybe encouraging them to actually physically go through and make the list and say, I haven't used this in 6 months. Maybe I can make 10 bucks. And that all of those things are going to add up slowly. And then certainly there are a number of different resources. So YouTube has like, if you just type in side hustle ideas, you'll get hundreds of videos for how to do that. I think now, especially the working from home model, everyone's trying to figure out creative ways to have active and passive income. Again, the coupon and reward apps, the unclaimed property search, Rover, you know, if you don't have a driver's license, walk people's dogs, right? Or can you do Instacart? If you do have a car, can you deliver people's groceries? Maybe it's raking the yard. If anyone knows of a teenager who will rake the yard without complaining, send them my way and I'll pay them. My teenager seems to just like to drag the rake across the yard. But all those things, you know, can they leverage a skill, a talent, or just do something that's nice for somebody else? And, you know, snow's coming, maybe they started a little shoveling business in the neighborhood, something like that. Always resources for that. Let's talk about, as we wrap up, some best practices, some things to think about as we're teaching personal finance concepts. Get a baseline. So figure out what they already think. What are their assumptions? And then start with the concepts that are most relevant for them. So if they're like, I think I can figure out how to budget, but I don't know anything about increasing my income, or like, what is insurance? How do I invest? We didn't talk about investment on here because I think that's even for me, like I'm still learning about investing. Stock market and investments is like the thing I know the least about. But get a baseline, survey them, ask them what they really want to know about. You know, and taking the shame out of it. Like if you have no idea how to budget or save, cool, we'll start there. Shifting the narrative by changing the vocabulary can really create buy-in. Of course, like telling stories, sharing your own personal anecdotes without, you know, blurring the line there. But I think some of those real world examples help the topic stick. Gamify, right? So make lessons approachable, make the resources fun, and don't reinvent the wheel if you don't have to. Use what exists. Here's a list of all the things that exist. I did not include Claim Your Future. That was my fault. I meant to add it. But Fame has our Claim Your Future program, which talks, you know, it's a all-encompassing game about budgeting, personal finance, educational attainment, career development, all of that. You can play at claimyourfuture.com or order a classroom kit. And we actually have a series of videos that will help you deliver it in person. It's me live going through the activity. But Nextgen, personal finance, iGrad is great. These are all free resources. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which you might be familiar with, you know, as the folks that you report like credit card fraud to or something like that, that is designed at the government level to provide support and protection for you, also has really great resources for educators for even as young as like kindergarten through middle school. They have little personal finance curriculum and all of that. I recently pulled something for them. They have a whole reentry. So I've been working a lot with folks reentering after being incarcerated, and they have a whole booklet just on like reentry success from a finance perspective that the CFPB put together. You know, can you partner with your local credit union to offer? I know many of the credit unions are offering sort of classroom online models and resources for personal finance. So find out if you can leverage some of that. Here's a couple of examples. So NGPF 9-week course, full semester long courses. You'll see there it's kind of laid out by each of the topics that we talked about, but also includes like credit and paying for college and investing. You can use and rework all of this stuff. Like they have created this in such a way that it's very customizable, very user-friendly to really help you drive home these concepts. iGrad, you can sign up for free at fame.igrad.com. We also can do presentations. So if you want us to come and talk to your students about these very topics, We can, I've done one on the importance of banking. There's many young people that don't, they carry cash or they're sort of unbanked, many adults as well. And so we talk, just what's the difference between a bank and a credit union? What's the value of being banked? All of that. So we can certainly come in and either in person whenever we get back to that or virtually assist with any of these topics and do presentations. We can lead Claim Your Future. We can do workshops. I'd love to sit down with a bunch of folks and go through pay stubs and let's talk about what that means and what you're earning versus what lands in your wallet and those sorts of things. So do feel like you can lean on us for support in teaching these concepts. Sometimes these things will stick if it's somebody else if a guest speaker is saying it versus hearing it from their parents or their teachers that they're familiar with. The name of the game, our website has a ton of money management resources. So if you go under topics, you'll see money management, you'll see a link to our managed publication. All kinds of the things that we've talked about today are linked under there, available for you to pull from. We'll have this presentation available on our YouTube channel, along with the Claim Your Future videos we talked about. And I'll make sure you all have access to the Google Doc, where you're hopefully listing all of your great ideas and hacks so that you can continue to add to that and share that with others. So I'm going to leave the last few minutes for discussion, questions, myth busting, whatever folks would like to do in the last few minutes. Thank you so much for giving me some of your afternoon today. I hope it was beneficial.
Maria, I just wanted to give a shout out to, I've been working with some JMG classes, and one of my teachers that I'm working with did ask me to come in and play Claim Your Future before they went virtual. And he contacted me and said, what do we do? Like, where you can't come in. I was like, well, I couldn't come in anyway. He was going to broadcast me via Zoom into his classroom. I said, let's just have everyone go onto the Zoom link. We played Claim Your Future online instead of the handheld game. We incorporated some polls. We try to do a lot with chat. So we try to make it super interactive. So lean on us, and your teachers that are frazzled because they, are having a hard time coming up with virtual content. Like, we're here to help support that. And also the Google sheet is still up and active, and you can use it for as long as you'd like to go back to. So
yeah, and I think the interaction is key, and I know that we're all kind of missing the face-to-face interaction, and I love playing the Claim Your Future in a classroom, but if you can leverage the technology, right, make use of the polls, make use of something like a real-time Google Doc, those sorts of things I think can help. And then if you add the gamification in, like I didn't talk about it, but NGPF has this other game called Payback, which is all about paying for college, which is really fun. And so they have to go through and make decisions about what they're going to furnish their dorm room with. And, do they go out to eat with their friends? And they have to keep their debt low. And so anything that can kind of make it fun and engaging is really going to help cement the concepts. And then they'll be like, oh yeah, I played a game about that thing. I guess I do need insurance, or I guess I do need to consider X, Y, and Z when I'm going through this topic. Thank you all for joining us. Be on the lookout for a follow-up email in the next couple of days. And thank you so much. I hope this was useful to you. And thank you for all of the hard work I know that you're doing during a very weird and strangely busy time. So thank you all.
High five, everybody.